So this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast only on the internet at approximately 10:30 hours GMT on Wednesday, the 24th of November. 24th of November 2021. And this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel discussing, diagnosing, examining, fact-checking about the state of the congenital liar, Boris Johnson. Now, there is a poster, the picture of a poster in a town somewhere in the UK. They don't mention the town in the caption, but maybe in the main piece by Katie Bowles, which has had a Tory criticism of Johnson is growing. Now, Katie Bowles works for The Spectator, and she's, by all accounts and all the evidence, she's closer to the Conservatives than to any other party or ideology. And it is not something that Katie Bowles would have written even 4 weeks ago. That shows that Johnson's congenital lying is getting exposed by the week, if not by the day. And what she's doing, she's quoting a number of people, Katie Bowles is, not necessarily naming them, but contextually identifying them as being either part of the cabal based at number 10 Downing Street, or in the conservative supporting Confederation of British Industries. Now, the acronym CBI confusingly reminds of the CBI in India, which is the Criminal Bureau of Investigations. And we shall come to that CBI and the role of that CBI in what is happening to Narendra Modi. Anyone who has keenly observed the kind of formal staging of the COP26 in Glasgow would have noticed that Johnson was looking like he was dragging Narendra Modi around. If we find the picture, we shall post it and update that photograph. And in April this year, Johnson had to be physically dragged himself away from getting on an aeroplane to India to meet Narendra Modi in India. Johnson was only forced out of that fantasy plane by the sheer kind of scare that surrounded the state of India under the Delta virus, which soon became a devastating failure on the part of Narendra Modi's regime to protect hundreds of millions of Indians that were affected and impacted by that. Now, in today's Financial Times, second leader, the editorial on page 26, is headed, Modi is humbled by India's farmers. So on the one hand, there is Katie Bowles talking about growing criticism of Johnson. And here is the kind of poster that actually sums up Boris Johnson's position. It says, not wanted, that is, Boris Johnson is not wanted. Please leave our town, whatever the town was. So this is Katie Bowles and the I newspaper. And this is the Financial Times' editorial, second editorial. The second editorial today, Wednesday, the 24th of November 2021, which is headed, Modi is humbled by India's farmers. And then there is a descriptive subheading, strong man is learning difficult reforms cannot be conducted by fiat. Now, fiat is a kind of authoritarian kind of thing, not directly the same as authoritarian fascism, but let's see what the dictionary has to say about fiat. So it says a formal authorization or proposition, a decree. The reforms left most prices fixed by government fiat. And what is the Merriam-Webster saying about fiat? It is saying an official order given by someone who has power, an order that must be followed, a command or act of will that creates something without, or as if without further effort. So what Modi is being condemned over is that he was behaving in an authoritarian, sub-dictatorial way against the farmers. And the subheading is also stupid because it says strong man is learning difficult reforms cannot be conducted by fiat. Now, Modi has been there in power for more than 10 years. And so therefore, the Financial Times, which we call Financial Crimes because it lies about the behavior of the likes of Modi and the likes of big business and capitalism, the Financial Crimes has been very soft on Modi. And that has been as bad for the hundreds of millions of people adversely affected by the corruption regime that is fronted by Narendra Modi. And that applies to The Guardian, that applies to the Times. In fact, all the Fleet Street papers have been overly accommodating to Modi. And in the last few months, since Johnson was literally dragged from boarding a plane bound for India, we have observed that the Financial Times has kind of Delhi-based correspondent and others have been too timid and too corrupt, and they have been allowing Modi to lie away. So Modi is a liar, and it is not a surprise that the liar, Johnson, had to be almost physically dragged away from an aeroplane from rushing to India to meet his co-liar Modi. And there are other kind of areas of collusion between Modi and Johnson, which are anti-democratic and against the interests of the people of India as well as the people of the, quote, UK. So what we are looking at in the first edition or part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel today, first of all, we are looking at the coming apart of the myths surrounding Boris Johnson in the UK and the myths fostered by the likes of the Financial Crimes and the Guardian, shoring up Narendra Modi. And there are too many narrative kind of elements that overlap the Modi dishonesty and Modi lying and the congenital liar Boris Johnson and his lying. So these Financial Crimes second leader of Wednesday the 24th of November 2021 is a rare one which even uses the concept of Modi being humbled. India's Prime Minister has been forced into one of the biggest U-turns of his premiership, announcing last week he would repeal 3 reform laws that had prompted year-long protest by farmers. The episode highlights again the pitfalls of his hard-driving, strongman approach. It also risks overdue changes to agricultural markets being set aside indefinitely or the government being forced into unwise concessions. So this is not really genuine condemnation of the liar Modi, but it's a kind of collaboration. It's a complicit piece of advice that the Financial Crimes is giving to Modi, based on its assumption that Modi's tactics against the farmers have allowed the farmers to undermine ideological approach that the Financial Crimes backs in Modi's reforms, so-called. The aims of the reforms were well-founded. That is what the Financial Crimes is saying about the Modi reform. A long-standing system of enabling farmers to sell food grains at government-guaranteed prices through markets managed by state committees had helped to stabilize supply and end shortages that were once common. It also led to overfarming, ecological damage, and warehouses stuffed with surplus grains. The new farm laws permitted private companies to buy directly from farmers and set out terms for contract farming. Modi argued, even as he announced the repeal last week, that his reforms would have given farmers more freedom to do business directly with buyers and lift incomes and encourage private investment and much needed diversification of crops. Now, what the Financial Crimes is deliberately denying and what Modi is lying about is the serious risk that farmers faced in the corrupt market and the corrupt system in India. And the guarantee, the stabilizing price guarantee, actually worked to help the kind of victims of the corruption in the market, in the system. So that is what the financial crimes is hiding. And Narendra Modi is in denial of. And although the financial crimes calls itself the capitalist Bible, it is getting the sums wrong. It's getting the facts wrong about the economy. And it is getting seriously wrong the real reason why the farmers were out on the streets and paralyzed half of India for a year, which is what the humbling by the farmers of Modi is about, this headline. Indian growers, though, had reason to fear being exploited by unscrupulous traders or big agribusiness companies and being left even worse off. Well, this is part of the admission, but that is part of the admission of the truth that the exploitation was rampant and would get even worse. These reforms needed to be handled with the utmost care and political finesse, which is what I said earlier, that the financial crimes is ideologically supporting Modi and faulting him only on the tactics that he used. These reforms needed to be handled with the utmost care and political finesse. That is what the financial crimes wants Modi to do, so that Modi succeeded. According to them, Modi would have succeeded. Instead, the Indian Prime Minister rushed them through Parliament in the middle of the pandemic without consultation or any attempt to build consensus. Few transitional safeguards were put in place. Even when farmers blockaded highways into New Delhi, Modi refused to engage, calling them professional protesters or terrorists, which is absolutely what we have said Modi had done. Not only did Modi condemn the protesters as terrorists, he called them Pakistani agents. I mean, Pakistan is the scary name for Indians' political narrative. Anyone who is accused of being in any way linked with Pakistan is doomed in India. And that's what Modi did. But he failed. And this is something that will undermine Modi's other foreign policy lies. It's not just about Pakistan, it's about China and about other countries as well. Effective as he may have been, he may be as an election winner. The Prime Minister has shown again that he is much less adept at day-to-day governance and policy making. His style is to make bold but often ill-planned demarches and attempt to roll over anyone who opposes him. The lessons of an earlier retreat on land reform and other controversial measures such as the 2016 demonetization of large banknotes. We condemned the demonetization as well at that time. And the discriminatory citizenship law of 2019, well, that is about denying Muslims, Indian Muslims, citizenship, have not been learned. But in the farming lobby, Modi has finally encountered a group he cannot overwhelm. The best outcome will be if the Prime Minister, that is Modi, learns that difficult reforms cannot be conducted by fiat, but only by the painful process of bringing to other constituencies on board through compromise and persuasion. He has an opportunity to show he is capable of such leadership by trying to put agricultural reforms back on track. Now, this is fantasy, because the financial crisis already says that he cannot do these things because he's not used to do this and he's not adapted these. So they're actually wishfully kind of thinking. The best outcome will be if the Prime Minister learns that difficult reforms cannot be conducted by fiat, but only by painful process of bringing other constituencies on board through compromise and persuasion. He has an opportunity to show he is capable of such leadership by trying to put agricultural reforms back on track. The risk is that farmers, having sensed their strength, push further, and that the government facing elections next year in Uttar Pradesh, India's largest state and a stronghold of Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, makes bigger concessions. Farmers intend to press for minimum support prices to be enshrined in the law, thus locking India into even more unsustainable agricultural policies. Now, this is what financial crimes is missing the point. The reason why the farmers have to do that, have to demand that minimum guaranteed price, is because of the corruption in the whole Indian system that nobody, including the financial crimes from abroad, is actually admitting. And nobody in the BJP or its other fascistic constituents is prepared to accept. Now, the financial crime is saying that Modi is facing a balancing act. He may have abandoned the farm reforms in an attempt at political damage control, but for some in his base, the about face has dented his image as an imperturbable strongman. The premier revels in the persona of all-powerful decision-maker. Yet for all his success in rallying voters to his Hindu nationalist agenda, his record in bringing about wise and lasting reform is thin. Achieving that means knowledge, achieving that means knowing when to be bold and hardline, and when to listen and conciliate. Now, the financial crimes is absolutely dedicated to supporting the corrupt Modi regime and the corrupt Modi far right coalition, the corrupt Modi anti Muslim kind of foundation. The Muslim is not mentioned in the financial crimes, but that is the biggest word and concept and driver of the Modi dictatorship and fascism. And it doesn't mention the Congress party either. So, what is Katie Bowles doing about Johnson? So she is another supporter of Boris Johnson. But Like the financial crimes on Narendra Modi, Katie Bowles is also uncertain at the end of her piece as to whether Johnson can be salvaged. And she is comparing Dominic Cummings and his replacement, Dan Rosenfield, as the new chief of staff for Johnson. And Katie Bowles is saying, where Cummings was accused of being too political, running a campaign rather than governing, senior Tories and advisors believe that Rosenfield is not political enough. He doesn't understand the Conservative Parliamentary Party. That means he can't make some of the key judgments, says one Johnson ally. So Katie Bowles, despite the appearance of being someone who's saying that Tory criticism of Johnson is growing, is actually lost for real analytical materials which she can put in the piece and show that Johnson can be salvaged. Only no one is quite sure who in Downing Street can give Johnson advice that Johnson listens to. Until that changes, the doubts over Johnson and his operation will only build. Now that is, again, so Katie Bowles has done her bit to find all kinds of sources that actually appear to be giving information about how to salvage Johnson. So somewhere in the middle of the piece, she says, the issue for Johnson is that no matter where the briefing comes from, the briefing that actually has shown Johnson having behaved in a demented way, that is, he's lost his brain and he's lost control, etc., etc. So that's the briefing, this unnamed briefing leaking, coming from Rishi Sunak's department, which she says, Katie Bowles, Rishi Sunak's department denies it. It only echoes what many of his allies, that is Johnson's allies, have been asking in recent weeks, who exactly is in charge? Now, this is the corrupt separation of Boris Johnson from himself. The question of who is in charge should be answered by saying Boris Johnson. And if Boris Johnson is not seen to be in charge of himself, then he is redundant. He should not be there in that place. But Katie Bowles doesn't want to say that. She keeps using the term, the concept of allies. But as the political landscape has worsened, so too has Boris Johnson's appeal. MPs are asking who thought it was a good idea for Johnson to do 3 speeches in one day, as he did on Monday. Just as they asked why no one told him saving Owen Paterson over Tory sleaze was a bad idea, or why tax rises were announced without having the social care policy funding finalized, etc., etc. But this is the kind of insider piece, because Katie Bowles, being a deputy political editor of the Spectator, which Johnson is very close to and is backed. I mean, the Spectator backs him even now. So this is the poster again. Once again, this is the poster that Katie Bowles' piece has. It says that Johnson is not wanted and he should leave the town, whatever the town is. Now, there is an advertisement by this Christmas time kind of appeal by Doctors Without Borders, Medicines Sans Frontiers. Now, this is the kind of truth of the Afghan disaster caused by the Americans and the British. We are treating malnourished children and the number is increasing. After 21 years, they have left this massacre and genocide. That's what is happening in Afghanistan now. And the news pages are empty. The news pages are completely blanking Afghanistan and the massacre and the genocide that is going on there. And we say that Keir Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party. And the evidence is brazenly obvious every single day. We shall come today I'm just looking for the piece in the Financial Crimes, the news piece, if you like. that actually substantiates the editorial piece that they have published about India. And there is this item in the Times of India, New Delhi edition today, which says that the Indian Delta variant cannot be stopped by the vaccines. That is what is on the front page of the Times of India, New Delhi edition today, 24th of November 2021. And there is another piece, the main piece on the Financial Times front page, the leader item. The front page lead item is against the crook, David Cameron. When in February 2011, the crook gave a racist and corrupt speech from the platform at Toynbee Hall in Commercial Street in Tower Hamlets, our campaign was the only one that denounced him. And we called him a crook and called him a liar, called him a racist, called him a fascist. Everything else we said about Cameron in 2011, only a few months into his tenure as the incumbent in the post of the condemned coalition prime minister. There is a promotional piece on page 1 of the Financial Crimes for Lyle Brainard, the woman that Joe Biden has appointed to be the vice chair of the Federal Reserve Bank. We shall talk about Joe Biden later. Now, this piece about the crook Cameron lobbying Tory he ennobled to save Greensil's deal with lawyers. I mean, this is not crime. This is robbery. This is robbery of the UK state by David Crook Cameron. So, as everything Cameron has been doing has vindicated what Dennis Skinner called Cameron, Dodgy Dave. I think an independent honor for political prescience should be created to recognize what Dennis Skinner did. Identified Dodgy Dave as a crook, big-time crook, and a thief. And to see the daily Boris Graf, riding Boris Graf, put Cameron on the front row at a kind of memorial held at Westminster yesterday. I mean, it is shocking. A big crook like that being shown as a somber-faced participant in the memorial event for Diagnoses. What kind of message are they giving to the public? So this is the bank persuaded not to cut ties, and party's ex-treasurer on the board. Lupton gave Conservatives 3 million. Now, this is absolutely the stuff that must be read out and made into the part of the broadcast that we are doing, Khoodeelaar television channel. Now, remember what we call it. You can see the baby angel Geronimo's face. He's running on the top right corner of the screen. He's running, and we call him the world's best, most healthy baby angel Geronimo. That's why we put him running there, because the perception of him as being the best, most healthy animal, Geronimo, is the most compelling and most kind of undeniable truth about baby angel Geronimo. The truth that has been subjected to persistent conspiracy by the depraved, the evil-doing DEFRA department, which in turn has been backed by the congenital liar Boris Johnson, who couldn't care less about the truth because he didn't actually examine. Every time he endorsed the DEFRA lies against baby angel Geronimo, Boris, the congenital liar, did that without looking at the evidence, without looking at the science, without looking at any of the other material, physical, substantial facts. So therefore, baby angel Geronimo defines every lie, every denial, every idiocy, every falsehood that the congenital liar Boris Johnson has been perpetrating. Every department. And we shall talk about Dominic Raab and the court system and the tightening, so-called, of the parole kind of policies. Now, the list of crooks in the Conservative Party is very long. So this is the woman who was made a member of the House of Peers by Dodgy Dave, the Crook Dave. Here it is. It says that the Financial Times has seen emails saying Michelle Moon was incandescent with rage, that she was very angry indeed, over minister's treatment of a company linked to her husband's business, which she referred for COVID contracts. Now that is on page 14. this is Michelle Moore. Now, when she was made a member of the House of Peers by David Cameron, she was openly mocked and ridiculed for her, quote, sex appeal. And what the people who commented on her being made a House of Peers member by David Cameron suggested was that she was given that peerage to do with her sex or sex appeal or attractiveness. So when we call certain behavior, like we call the Supreme Court's behavior, so David Neuberger's statements and role as the stooge publicizing Brexit at the behest of David Lidington, we call that role played by David Neuberger as prostitution. So the prostitution is not confined to just David Neuberger and the corruption of the corrupt court system. The prostitution is very much linked with the making of people members of parliament by the back door. Members of the House of Lords is a parliamentary position. So that is just the kind of contextual background information that I have just stated, because there is no such reference in the Financial Crimes or any other paper whatsoever. But that is what was the original kind of comments or commentary about Michelle Moon. The email reveals Moon's anger for MedPro Group that has ties to husband's businesses. Let's see what it says. Anna Gross and Jemima Kelly. Michelle Moon, a conservative peer and founder of a lingerie brand, was incandescent with rage. Now, lingerie is to do with mainly women's bodies, dresses and whatever. So she is not far removed in every respect from the physical and the, quote, glamour basis for her ennoblement. Michelle Moon, a conservative peer and founder of a lingerie brand, was incandescent with rage about the government's treatment of a company she referred for COVID-19 related contracts, according to correspondence sent by the Financial Times. An email sent to government colleagues by Jackie Rock, Chief Commercial Officer for NHS Test and Trace, revealed a level of engagement between Moon and PPE MedPro, which has links to the business of Moon's husband, and was awarded £200 million of contracts to supply PPE to the NHS. The email said Baroness Moon is going to Michael Gove and Matt Hancock today, as she is incandescent with rage on the way she believes MedPro have been treating sick. Rock said that Moon believed the company was being fobbed off over the validation process for its COVID testing technology. Rock told her colleagues that this is going to blow up today in the email sent on February the 10th. The depiction of Moon was viewed as lobbying by one test and trace official who told the Financial Times that it riled me no end. Last week, Politico revealed that Moon had been the source of referral between government and PPE MedPro. Moon previously told the Financial Times no such meeting with government minister had taken place. The Conservative Party has for 2 weeks been embroiled in a scandal over sleaze, with MPs accused of using their positions to further business interests. One of PPE MedPro's directors, Anthony Page, is also a director of Knox House Trust, part of the Knox Group, a group of companies founded by Douglas Barrowman, Moan's husband. Page had been the registered secretary for MGM Media, a company that manages Moan's personal brand, according to the House of Lords Register of Financial Interests, etc., etc. Now, this is like robbery. This is like robbery by the Conservatives in the House of Peers and in the House of Commons. And this is multi-billion pound robbery that has been the product of the COVID-19 in this country. And there is no mention of any court case. There is no mention of any legal process. There is no mention whatsoever on a breach of any of the rules whatsoever. So we shall be really talking about this even more. What is happening in the Boris Johnson fronted cabal called government is that the crooks have taken positions. Crooks have taken positions in various parts of the operations. Let's say in this context, in this topical context, the NHS or the health service. And instead of the kind of parallel positions that they've taken, in effect replacing what should have been the objectively active, quote, civil servants. That parallel takeover by crooks and thugs under frontage of Boris Johnson is not being discussed at all, not even by, of course, not by the financial crimes and not by the likes of Katie Bowles. Although the financial crimes does have the editorial saying the fixing relations between the Tories and business, it doesn't talk about the corruption. So let's go back to the corruption, if there is any mention of corruption in that editorial. And the financial crimes is doing the same thing about this as it has done about Narendra Modi. Because the ideology is not under scrutiny. Modi's ideological move about the farming in India is supported by the financial crimes. And the heading, Modi is humbled by India's farmers, is false. Similarly, the fixing the relations between the Tories and business does not take into account this item in the financial crimes on page 14, healthcare. It's not healthcare, it should be about corruption. The financial crimes piece should be described as a corruption investigation. So where do you go? Diagnosing Fleet Street papers, the world exclusive diagnosis that we are doing, means that we are left with no choice on the facts and the evidence and the contents, but to condemn each and every piece as contradictory, inadequate, and itself corrupt. So there is no way that this pile of lies, misinformation, disinformation, inaccuracy by Fleet Street can be dealt with in any effective way. So the conclusion is that the Fleet Street papers are liars, layers of lies and lying, even under the pretend headings of being critical. As I said, Katie Bowles and the Financial Crimes on the front page saying that Cameron lobbied Tory he ennobled to save Greenseal's deal with lawyers. Now that is not one crime. That is evidence of multiple crimes by Cameron, by Greenseal, by the... Look at this one, what they're saying in the last paragraph. Months before Greenseal's collapse in March, lawyers indicated that it would stop doing business with the firm, jeopardizing a supply chain finance scheme for NHS pharmacies operated by Greenseal that relied heavily on the bank for funding. So this is exposing the banks in the real roles. Banks are in criminal business. I mean, millions of pounds of loans being obtained from lawyers by Greenseal on the guarantee. That is the equivalent of the kind of guarantee, financial guarantee, being made by the government. That is what Dodgy Dave was involved in doing. So the next paragraph is, after Cameron's plea, which flagged the threat lawyers' withdrawal posed to the NHS scheme, the bank reconsidered its decision and agreed to continue funding the pharmacies for a period. Hundreds of millions of pounds procured by the crook, David Cameron. Hundreds of millions of pounds. Lapton declared his relationship with Cameron when passing on the former Prime Minister's request. However, some people inside the bank found Cameron's intervention by Lapton to be surprising and unwelcome, coming after lawyers made a business decision to end the relationship. They said it was decisive in causing the U-turn. Lawyers said the decision to continue this facility in January 2021 was made on the usual commercial basis and in recognition of the importance of maintaining this facility for the NHS during the height of the pandemic. Now that is a lying statement by lawyers. And the lying is actually intended to show that the liars and the crooks are doing a favor to the NHS, which is the opposite of what they were doing. They were fleecing, they were stealing, they were robbing the money, millions, hundreds of millions. This program ended following the administration of Grenfell with the bank repaid in full. The bank added. There were no losses to the NHS. The pharmacy supplying them or Lloyds banking group. That is the statement. That's not the truth. Grenfell declined to comment. Of course, they're the main robbery fronters. Cameron did not respond to requests for comment. This is yesterday. And nor did Lapton, who was directly requested for comment. And he declined to comment via lawyers either. All these criminals involved in the crimes and robbery and thefts declined to comment. What is this? They were protecting themselves from being, quote, in a position which, if they made any statement, might incriminate them. Only criminals are aware of accidentally incriminating themselves. That is why they say no comment. Remember that phrase? Now, the newspaper, which is described boastfully by its Lebanese Muslim born woman editor as capitalism's Bible, is running a completely stupid, misleading piece. The headline: Biden bid to tame oil prices by releasing 50 million barrels from stockpile backfires. Now, who else would be in any position to do anything different which would not backfire? It's the capitalism that is at fault. It's not functioning. Instead of blaming Biden for the backfiring, the capitalist market, the consumption and the oil abuse is at the root of all these backfiring and the hyper rate of price rise that has been going on. As with the Bible of capitalism, so is the case with the Daily Mail, the corrupt platform. The Daily Mail, there is a footnote here. My clear memory is that Paul Dacre was, for a period, not for a long period, but for a period, editor of the Times newspaper. Yet the entry on Paul Dacre in the Wikipedia entry on Paul Dacre doesn't mention that. It does mention a very misleading kind of event, saying that Rupert Murdoch, who owned the Times at that time already, tried to get Paul Dacre to act as editor of the Times, but this didn't work out. Now, does it mean that Dacre was editor of the Times for a short period and it didn't work out? Or does it mean that Murdoch's attempt to appoint Paul Dacre editor of the Times didn't reach conclusion? And the fact that the wiki entry is inconclusive is not proof of anything that happened or didn't happen. It means that the Wikipedia politically is getting more corrupt by the entry, if you like. The guy who founded the Wikipedia has taken up residence in the UK and is increasingly kind of curtailing all traces of the truth or accuracy from entries that are linked to political kind of position. Now here is the picture of dodgy Dave Cameron sitting on the front next to John Major, and on the other side is Theresa May, followed by Lindsay Hoyle, followed by Priti Patel, followed by Boris Johnson. Now this crook, according to the Financial Times piece, should not have been sitting there. Well, if the Financial Times piece that Cameron's role there as a thief in chief, then he shouldn't be there sitting there, and he shouldn't be given the photographic gallery spot by the Daily Mirror either. But the fact that he was there, and the fact that the Daily Mirror, which is not a Tory supporter party politically, does give him that space, shows that the Daily Mirror is as corrupt and as ignorant and as dishonest as the others who do support the Conservatives. So when we say that this is the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, that is what we mean. Well, there is a piece in the Beaverbrook Express about the feud between the BBC and the family of Brenda's kind of existing family, except the ones that have been pushed out of Britain. Because the line in the BBC documentary broadcast yesterday on the BBC Two or before yesterday was that Harry and Meghan were briefed against by royal family, and that Harry and Meghan have been kind of pushed to leave this country. We shall be talking about that in later parts, and also we shall be talking about the murder of the two parents while the children, 5 and 6 years old, slept upstairs in a place in Somerset. According to the police, the row that has been mentioned as the reason for the murder, the row about parking row between the victims and their murderer, a British soldier, former soldier, has been the reason for at least 3 visits by police, visits to the addresses. Now, if the police had been already aware of the rows, and if they indeed had called 3 times in response to communications to them by the murderer and their victims, now the question arises, could the murders be prevented? And could the victims be saved? Could have been saved? And could some action be taken in time during the 3 visits to prevent this leading to the murders? And if extrapolated, how many other similar kind of relationships, tense and explosive relationships between neighbors leading to tragedies and murders could be prevented by the authorities? And what, if any, did the local Somerset Council do to help the victims stay alive and avoid being murdered? Now extrapolate that across the country and you see the dangerous things being done or dangerous events taking place, including the murder of that 6-year-old boy. I mean, words do not exist to express the depth of sorrow that boy was in before he was murdered by his so-called parents. How many contacts with the local councils and the police had been made before the child was murdered? How depraved are these people who are doing this to that child and children like that? Too many children are being murdered by their so-called parents in this country. Isn't it shocking enough? If it is, then where is the outrage in Fleet Street, by Fleet Street, via Fleet Street and the mainstream media? And if there is not, then why not? What does it share? What does it show about the culture? Who is tolerating this? And why? What are they signaling? On the one hand, they say that they want people to be vaccinated to help people against the COVID-19. If that is genuine, then how is it at the same time a boy like that, a 6-year-old boy, has been tortured and murdered by his so-called own parents? Something is missing. Who is neglecting a potential victim like that 6-year-old boy? And if the boy is neglected by the same people who are screaming that the vaccine, that those who are opposed to vaccine are somehow responsible for some spread of the illness, something is missing there.